Annual Hong Kong Cinema. My name is Rod Armstrong. I'm a programmer with SF Film, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this screening of Our Time Will Come. I have a few thanks to get out of the way before we bring up our guests for tonight's screening, and they are our presenting sponsor, the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office. Special thanks to Ivanhoe Chang and Grace Yu for a partnership that has gone on for since the inception, really, of this program, and also extends to the Hong Kong films that we present during the festival. We love working with the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office. It's a wonderful mutual relationship. I would also like to thank Penelope Wong and Tim Coaches, our patrons of Chinese cinema. Yes. Their support helps us showcase great Chinese language films throughout the year. Wonderful pleasure working with them both, and I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of you this weekend. We've also got some interesting programs happening all over the city. In mid-October, we continue our relationship with San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, presenting the Modern Cinema program that happens 3 times a year. And the program in October is focusing on the work, the partnership really, of Christine Vachon and Todd Haynes. As some of you may know, they have a new film, Wonderstruck, that debuted in Cannes to rave reviews, and it either has just played or is about to play at the New York Film Festival. And we're greatly pleased that Christine Vachon will be here during the middle weekend to present some of the films in that program. But we asked them, they have about 10 or 11 films that they've worked on together that we're presenting, and then we asked each of them to select films that have inspired or influenced them. And the program ranges from everything to Oliver, the Best Picture winning musical, to The Go-Between with Julie Christie and Alan Bates, to the wonderful Nicholas Roeg movie performance. So we hope you check out that schedule and join us for some of those films. Doc Stories, our very popular documentary program, is going to be running at the Vogue in November, the first weekend of November. So stay tuned for announcements very soon about that program. And in order to find out about all of these programs and more, just sign up for our email list, or even better, become a member. How many members do we have in the audience? Oh, wow, that's fantastic. And then the rest of you can sign up when you get home this evening. Okay, so let's get on to Hong Kong cinema. As always, I'm really pleased to see the breadth of films that are coming out of Hong Kong, that since it came back under Chinese semi-governance, I guess you could say, there was some concern about whether the cinema would still kind of attain the heights that it had before. And I think we see an even perhaps greater interest in the filmmakers of the future. There are a lot of scholarships and grants being offered to first-time filmmakers in Hong Kong, and we presented some of those films. One of them screens, let's see, I believe Sunday, with Prisoners, was like I said, one of the winners of one particular grant. And so it's not only action films, but romantic comedies, romantic dramas. With Prisoners, the one that I mentioned, deals with the juvenile delinquency system in Hong Kong, and is really kind of a call to action about what's going on there and some concerns around it. And of course, we're presenting 2 films by the marvelous director Anne Hui. As Noah said over at the reception, this filmmaker has long been a favorite in San Francisco and is one of Noah's all-time greats. And besides this new film that we're presenting, it's a real pleasure to have a 35mm print of one of her early masterpieces, Boat People, and that is screening on Sunday. So as far as this film goes, it, like many of her films, tackles particular historical elements in rousing and moving fashion. And it also kind of daringly deals with history and politics. Those of you who have read some of the backstory around this film or Boat People will know that she's no stranger to making work that challenges established notions of historical events. And while Anne couldn't be here for these screenings, it's a great pleasure to have a producer who has worked with her on 3 projects in a variety of capacities, and is knowledgeable about the amount of research that went into this project, and will be here to talk with us after the film about it. But for now, it's a great pleasure to introduce Roger Lee.
Yes, before I left Hong Kong, I met with Anne Ho, and she said she wanted to come here, but her mother is in her 90s now and has Alzheimer's. So she has to spend more time with her, and she's doing a lot less traveling these days. So hope you understand. But her spirit is with you tonight.
Cool. And we also have several interesting slides to show you about the historical personages that are featured in the film, and we're going to talk a little bit about those as well as Roger's involvement with the project. So thank you so much for joining us. Please turn off your cell phones, leave them off for the duration of the screening, and we'll see you after the film. I want me black producer Roger Lee. We're going to stand off to the side while we're showing the slides. Just kind of as a brief introduction to them, I just wanted to say that basically there's going to be a series of historical photos of some of the main characters alongside the actors who played them. And Roger's going to give you a little bit of information about the real life people. And so we just need a minute to boot up the system, and whenever Julie's ready up there, we can have the first slide.
Okay, while we're waiting, let me put a footnote to this. When I was doing the photo composite in Hong Kong, Miriam suggested that I put my photo with Andy Lau. She said, "You look so much older." Of course, I said, I'm 10 years older than Andy Lau, and I never had any facelifts. So I'm not suggesting that any of the actors had facelifts in this movie, but you see, I won't verify true or false. All right, the first one, Phong Lan. So this is the real Phong Lan, and this photo was taken at the age of 29 in 1950, after the war. So after the war, Phong Lan stayed in Hong Kong and became a teacher in Lantau Island. And she was summoned back to China to lead the Women Patriots group, and she held that job for a long time. She did get married at the age of 34, and she married a newspaper editor called Mr. Chiu, and they did not have any children, but she took care of Mr. Chiu's children from his first marriage. So in 1997, after the Hong Kong handover to China, Phong Lan returned to Hong Kong for the first time and to visit her mother's grave. And she was very emotional during that time. So she died 1 year later, 1998, in Canton at the age of 77. Okay. Next. Okay, this is Phong Lan's mother, Feng Ji, and she joined the Communist Party in 1937. Dini did not have any facelift. She just looked 10 years younger because she's playing the character that's 10 years younger. All right? She was captured by the Japanese soldiers and executed in 1944 at the age of 60 in the Stanley prison, together with Zheng Wenying, the girl you saw in the movie. And she was a real character also. She was a young, educated socialite who knows English, and her father was a banker. But her father was captured by the Japanese and put into a concentration camp. Next is Blackie Lau. After the Japanese surrendered, there's an internal warfare between the nationalists and communists. And 1946, Black Lau, himself a communist, was ambushed by the nationalists. And he was shot in both legs and died from a leg infection at the age of 27. Fong Lan and him never met again. Okay, next. This is Mr. Shen and his wife. His pen name is Mao Tun. So after the war, Mr. Shen became a magazine editor and published quite a few books until he died in Beijing in 1981 at the age of 85. Shen is lauded as one of the most prolific authors in China. And his wife died from diabetes in 1970, around the time of the Cultural Revolution. So that's a brief history of what happened to all these characters.
All right, and so now we'll move to the center, and I'm just curious to hear what you may know, since we've seen these historical photos alongside the actors who played them, how the actors were cast. Did you have much influence on that? Do you know any of the juicy stories? Facelifts or no facelifts?
Oh, they were chosen because simply they were good actors to start with, and then there's the financial angle that if they can sell money in the box office. So those are two main concerns. So they don't look alike,
right.
In other words.
But do you know who was cast first, who kind of perhaps came along at what time in the project, or was there somebody who was always in mind for a particular role? I mean, it seems the character of Blackie Lau, I mean, it just seems like that actor was born to play that part. There's such a vibrancy to him.
Actually, he wasn't the first choice. First choice was Ging, who did Wolf Warriors Part 2. Now the biggest the record breaker in China. So.
And what was the actor's name who was originally cast?
Wu Jing.
Oh, okay.
He's the hottest property right now. If he had played this part, I think the movie would have made the millions. Anyway, this was the second choice.
And perhaps you can talk a little bit about at what point you got involved with the project. As we were alluding to in the introduction, you've worked with Anne on a couple of other projects before, and so are you involved kind of from the gestation to the filming, or was the project already kind of financed or a little bit put together before you came into it?
Anne was interested in making movies about Hong Kong during the wartime, so she read a lot of research materials, and I helped her with interviewing some of the old soldiers who were still alive. Most of them are in the 90s, some are close to 100. So they were hard to interview, but they were still around when we did the research. By the time the movie came out, some of them have died, I mean, of old age. So it's very precious to keep these information.
So in those present day interviews, when Anne is on camera interviewing people, is she kind of recreating those interviews? Because I assume it's actors who are playing the people that she was interviewing.
One or two are real soldiers also.
Oh, okay.
So the place that the location we used was the actual place we had the interviews. So there's some reality to the
yeah, I was
location.
wondering when you talked about their age, I thought, oh, I wonder if she's just using actors, but no, a couple of the people were actually.
Leung Ka-fai, the Ban Zai, was a real Ban Zai, but he passed away before the movie was released. So that was sad.
All right, and then if we can have some house lights up to make sure I don't miss any questions, and it looks like there's one down here in the front.
Where do you find these properties to film all of these locations?
Where do you find the locations to shoot historical footage? Because the recreation is quite striking.
All right. Anne refused to shoot anything on the set, so everything in the movie was real location. So 2/3 of the movie was made in Hoi Ping, and 1/3 of it is in Hong Kong. And for the Hoi Ping part, there were real people living in these houses. We just paid them to live in a hotel. And they turned the house upside down for a month. So, but the neighbors were still living there. But this particular house, the tenants stayed in the hotel for a month.
But the whole village almost looks like it's never.
Yes, that's the Hoi Ping was very well preserved. And I was telling in the Singdo interview this morning that these houses are actually built by U.S. laborers, Chinese laborers in U.S. who came to places like San Francisco and New York at the turn of the century. So they were hard laborers making money and sent home money to build these houses. And for the family to live in and for them to retire after a certain age. So they were, there's a Western style to Chinese houses. That's why the architecture was so interesting also.
Yes?
Can you point out some of the places in Hong Kong that the scene was shot?
All right. They are mostly outside of the city. In those colonial houses, the offices were real built by the British, and they were in the New Territories mostly. And most of them have been preserved as historical buildings. And they are now, we just asked for permission to shoot over there. So they were really colonial style, built by the British in the 1900s.
Yes?
Can you talk about the script development process?
Can you talk about the script development process?
Okay, the research took about a year and a half, and we invited Ho Kei-ping to write the script. So she did some research and interviewed all these old soldiers also. So that process took about 8 months. And there were like 4 or 5 drafts to it.
Yes?
I'm wondering the poem 明月几秀 had mentioned through the whole film by both like Chinese and Japanese. So does it mean something special to the director, or just does it have any special meaning to the film?
I'm not a literature person, so I cannot explain the true meaning behind the poem. But people have been interpreting it as the meaning of war in peace in the time of war, or express hope for a better future.
Yes?
Probably a stupid question, but has it been seen in Japan, the movie?
Not yet. I wonder if it will be popular over there. But as you see, it's the music is composed by a Japanese composer, and he didn't feel offended by it.
It was one of the more friendly movies toward war movies toward Japan that I've ever seen.
Oh, okay. Well, someone was saying that Anne is half Japanese also. So, so they were saying Anne was very kind to the Japanese. The truth is, Anne did not want to offend any Japanese or Chinese for the whole movie.
All right. I think we've gotten to all of the questions. Please join me in thanking Roger Lee for being here. If you enjoyed the film and want to tell your friends about it, it screens one more time tomorrow at 1:30, and Roger will be here, and we'll show those same photographs, so please let your friends know. And tickets for most of the other films are available except the Saturday night screening, so we hope you'll come back. Thank you so much for joining us.